Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we wanted to discuss cash rent versus share rent. These are two different types of rental arrangements that landlords have with their tenants on farms today.
Well, Brian, as a farmer who does rent some ground, I have to say cash rent and share rent are both a little high. They're both a little excessive, Brian. If it could be just a little lower, that'd be more fun for me.
Yes, but well, you may be a farmer, you're also a landowner who does share rent some ground out.
Well, this is true.
So,
this is true.
Yep. So I just got an email yesterday. It's funny that we're talking about this today because this question that I got from a viewer was simply, the person was a landowner and he said, well, should I cash rent my ground? Should I share rent my ground? I was talking to somebody, I've been share renting 50-50 and I've been paying for half of everything, but I was talking to somebody else who said, well, I should only be paying for half of the fertilizer and chemical and not half the seed. And what should I do? Should I custom farm the ground? I mean, there are a lot of different ways to go when you're a landowner, especially now that commodity prices are pretty good. Yields overall have been pretty good for the last 10 years. You have a lot of options.
Well, I think it's interesting because this changes depending on where you're at. I mean, the soils are different all across the country, and really even all across this county, the soils are much different, and the situation that each farmer has is a little bit different. And maybe one farmer has some equipment but not others, and he shares some equipment with somebody. And maybe the landlord says, well, hey, I've got this combine and it wasn't worth it to sell it, so I'm going to keep it and you can use the combine as part of the deal. Or maybe you have a landlord that wants to come out and help a little bit at harvest or at planting time, and so you work something into the agreement that way. Everyone has their own unique situation. You just have to find that right fit with you and your landlord.
And one of the things that I brought up to this particular landowner yesterday in my response to him by email was just that you have to determine what is most important to you. Is getting the most net profit short term important, or is it more important to get along with neighbors? Or is it more important to make sure that your ground is in better condition? So for example, one of the things that I suggested this landowner might do is put right in a rental agreement that the farmer has to at least replace all the nutrients that his crop removes from the soil.
Oh, you're speaking right to my situation, Brian. I picked up some ground, as I've talked about before on the show, just a few years ago, and that ground was the lowest fertility ground I had ever seen because it had been cash rented out for the last 20 or 30 years, different tenants every few years. Well, if you don't have a long-term agreement, those tenants really didn't want to take a chance and put a bunch of extra fertilizer out there that they may not get the benefit of that year, because who knows who's going to be renting that ground next year? If somebody else is renting it, well, wow, I just spent an extra $50 or $100 an acre on fertilizer that now somebody else gets to take the benefit of. So everybody was shorting it just a little bit, and my fertilizer levels got down to something very unusual for our area. And that's a situation that you can get into real quick when you're cash renting and have no control over what's getting put on for fertilizer.
Well, once again, there are a lot of different ways that a landowner can rent his ground out to a farmer. Cash rent is the simplest and easiest, but with cash rent, you really don't have any control, or a lot of control, unless you specifically put certain things into that rental agreement.
But then if you do that, if you have all these different requirements of your tenant, there's a lot of tenants that may be good farmers that say, oh man, I don't want to have to jump through all these hoops when I can just go a mile down the road and rent it from this guy just for a straight cash deal.
But that's where I say it just depends on what you're after. If you really want your ground to be left in better condition, my suggestion is to put several different of those clauses in the contract, and especially it's to make sure that the farmer's at least replacing as many nutrients as his crops are removing. So anyway, there is cash rent, there is that share rent option, and that varies depending on the area of the country. Could be 50-50, could be 60-40, could be 1/3, 2/3, and it also could be that you as the landowner pay for a portion of the seed or the fertilizer or the pesticides or all of those things. You just have to work those things out.
Well, and just because you're in a share rent situation doesn't mean you have a whole lot of control either. I mean, there's a lot of landlords that we work with that say, look, I want to do a share thing, but you guys just take care of it. You understand this farming game. You know what's going on with seed and crop protection and those things, and that's fine too. But it is kind of fun for a lot of guys to say, I've farmed my whole life. I want to have half the corn that comes off that ground, so I've got some that I can market. Some guys really like that, Brian, watching the price go up and down and trying to hit it just right. Personally, that's one of my least favorite things about farming. I wish I just knew what I was going to get so I could put all my focus into raising the most bushels instead of watching the markets too.
Well, with all these different rental arrangements, it doesn't matter which way you're going as a landowner, you want to make sure that you have control of our Weed of the Week. We'll tell you how to stop it on your farm coming up later in the show.